DES 3321, Dental Materials Lab, the trimming of dental stone models, Class 7, Lesson 7. First of all, you need to determine what you're trimming. What is the original purpose of the model? Was it intended for study models, bleaching trays, ortho models, crown and bridge, dentures? Was the proper stone used? You have a couple of different options, so you need to make sure that your purpose matches the type of stone that you're using. And then, does it need a base? A base typically is used for study models, also for denture casts. Bleaching trays, however, are trimmed in a U shape, so they do not need a base. And how many points should be on the model, or what style of trim are you going to do? So let's review each one individually. You have styles for trimming models. First style is style 1, where you have 7 points on the maxillary and 6 points on the mandibular. Now if you look specifically here on the maxillary, you will see that 1 point is between the anterior centrals. You have another point roughly where the cuspids are. And you have another one down here on the buccal portion. The distal buccal portion is typically where they land, of where the first or second molar is. So you have one here and one here, and then another one finishing off both heels of the models. So for this particular model, you have 7 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. On the mandibular, it's the exact same as the maxillary. However, down here in the anterior portion, you do not have a point. It just simply rounds off from cuspid to cuspid. Style 2, you have 7 points on the maxillary and 7 points on the mandibular. So they are exact mirror images of one another. Style 3, you have 4 points on the maxillary and 4 points on the mandibular. You have 1 point here and here, as well as here and here. So 2 on each side. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then style number 4 is no points on the maxillary and no points on the mandibular. It simply rounds off all the way around each model. The style that we are going to be using for bleaching trays that have no base poured, we're going to be using style 4, or a U shape. Trim for both your upper and your lower models. Okay, for your rough trim with bases, we're going to use style 1 that has 7 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. One between the anterior centrals, 2 cuspids, and of course you have the distal buccal portions of each one, as well as the heels. We'll be using style 1 for models with bases. Style 1 has 7 points on the maxillary and 6 points on the mandibular. Now, as we turn the models over, you can notice slight variations according to the arch size that you're going to be dealing with. But as you turn the models over and you don't see the occlusal surface of the teeth, it's easier to see the 7 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And this is an actual mold. This is a rough trim that was done. And compared side by side, you can see that the angles are a little bit different, but all the points and the angles are there. Style 1 maxillary model with a base. Let's review the basic steps for style 4 first. Bleaching trays are style 4, so remember they're trimmed in a U shape. So you'll check the stone to make sure that it's set up. Once it's properly set up, you'll pull the stone from the impression using your fingers or a knife. You can generally just grab onto an edge of the stone that's there and pull on it, and it will come loose from the impression. Or you can take a knife and you can put it underneath one of the heels and lightly pry it up on one side or the other to get it to loosen up. Be very careful though, because if your molar is really close to where the tray is, you may end up damaging your impression. Step 2, you'll soak your model for about 3 to 5 minutes, making sure that it's thoroughly saturated and it doesn't have any more air bubbles coming out of it. When you first place your model in water, you'll start to see air bubbles rising to the top. You want to get to the point where there are no more air bubbles coming out of the model. Step 3, you'll trim the back heels. The heels are pretty much the distal portion of whatever molars are still left in the mouth. So if it's at the first molars or the second molars, you'll go to the distal portion of the second molars back in the retromolar pad area and trim the model. Step 4, you'll lay the model down on the table, the aluminum table that's provided on the model trimmer, and make sure that it's level. Is there a nice right angle coming down between the centrals, lining up with the table and going out to one side or the other? should be really nice and really uniform. You'll trim the bottom or the base of the model. So angling the model up against the grinding wheel, you'll trim the bottom portion. And as you push towards the grinding wheel, it takes a lot of this excess flash and grinds it away. Step 6, you'll trim the posterior tooth sides of the model on one side and then the other. And your finished non-angled trim without angles, this is ideal for bleaching tray fabrication, a quick occlusal bite registration if you're doing some sort of registration between the arches or a quadrant, or producing a matrix safe or a provisional temporary. These work out quite nicely to throw in a vacuum form machine. Remember, for style 4, the U-shaped trim, it's used on both the maxillary and the mandibular. So when you're doing your bleaching trays, this is the type of trim that we'll have. Okay, basic steps for style 1. Now this one has a base, so you'll repeat steps 1 and 2. On step 3, you'll trim the back heels of the model again. And as you trim it and push it towards the grinding wheel, you'll start to see that it will start to level off. You will check to see if it is level again by laying it down on the aluminum table that is there provided for you. Step 4, we'll trim the model in the posterior areas of the teeth, so roughly from where the cuspid is back to where the last molar is. That will be considered your posterior area on one side and the other. You'll trim in the anterior areas roughly from between the centrals down to halfway through the cuspid. So from the cuspid area to the centrals. And then you'll trim the rear posterior areas. And that's the distal buccal of generally the second molar. And then you'll trim the top. Now, on a bottom model, this is considered the base, but you will trim the top here to make sure that it is level. And then you will check the model symmetry to make sure that you have all of your angles, all 7 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are provided for you. This PowerPoint will be provided for you as well on the computers in the UCDH computer lab.